people who knowingly slept with someone who wasn't single. What's your dirtiest confession? To be honest, I've never really cared. Thinking back, I can distinctly remember three different women. One had a boyfriend, one had a husband. She cheated on him with my friend and then cheated on my friend with me, and one had a husband and was recently married, claiming she was in an open relationship while her husband was deployed. I know there were more, but those are the ones I remember most. All three were straight trash. The first two were when I was 19 to 21 years old, both about 5 years older than me, and neither ended well. The last one was when I was a bit older and knew better, but she was attractive, 22 years old, and had told me she was an exotic dancer a year before. Who wives up a club dancer? She said it was just for financial benefits. It turned out she was not in an open marriage, and they were married for much more than just the benefits. That didn't end well either. Did I feel bad? Do I feel bad now? Do I regret doing any of it? Nope. It was always my philosophy. If she goes outside the relationship, you never really had her in the first place. She's not yours. It's just your turn. Story 2. I slept with a married coworker. He told me he loved me less than 2 weeks in. Before that, I went back and forth about telling his wife because he had a lot of issues I wasn't attracted to. Drug use, my family would have hated him, things like that. He made all the first moves. I liked him, but I never planned on doing anything until he pursued me. He told me he was in love with me, that he wanted to leave his wife, and that he was going to. It was clear there were problems in their marriage, and even our coworkers thought so. I convinced myself everything would be okay if he divorced her, and that no one would get hurt because she would never know he cheated. Even though he initiated everything, I was wrong too because I let it continue for almost 2 years. I eventually told his wife anonymously, and she figured out it was me since she already had suspicions. Everything spiraled from there. I thought I was in love with him, but he was really manipulating me, and honestly, I knew it the whole time. I think his wife initially wanted to divorce him, and I believe they even filed, but I don't think they ever went through with it. It is what it is. I regret it more than anything else in my life and never want to be involved in something like that again. I hope to eventually find someone who truly loves me. Story 3. She told me they were only still together for the kids' sake and were essentially separated. She painted him as a terrible, controlling man and said they were free to see whoever they wanted. I bought it and started hooking up with her regularly. One day, I got a call from a very nice man, her husband. He was worried about her and had heard around town that she was seeing me. We talked for a long time, and it turned out she had been lying. He was actually an amazing guy. So we made a plan. I invited her out for drinks and told him where and when. The look on her face when she realized it was a setup was unforgettable. I was furious that she put me in that position, but the payoff was worth it. He's still a social media friend. He's remarried to a much nicer woman, and his ex is still causing trouble and drama at the local bars. Story 4. For the people on here saying they aren't responsible or don't owe anyone anything because they're single, it's called empathy. Taking part in something you know will ultimately hurt another human being is disgusting. And what kind of person sleeps with a liar and a cheater? Have some self-respect. I've had married men try to fool me, and what really turns them off is actually talking about their issues and how to fix them. You always have a choice, and karma comes around. I've also been on the other side, and everyone I've known who sleeps with married or taken people automatically gets downgraded in my book. Maybe you don't care what other people think, but I'd feel disgusted with myself. I'm not saying it's always black and white, but it takes minimal effort to be a good human to others. Story 5. No regrets at all. I was single, and he flirted with me, hit on me, and invited himself over. He made the first move, and I followed. We were both massively attracted to each other and eventually ended up in bed. I saw the whole situation as I've done nothing wrong. I'm single. I always knew he was committed, but like others on here have said, it's not my responsibility to manage someone else's relationship. If someone is okay with cheating, so be it. I'm not responsible for them being disloyal to their partner. Story 6. I was in Tampa for a wedding and hooked up with one of the guests who happened to be married and older. I was 32 at the time, and she was 44, but she looked younger and was gorgeous with a very fit body. I felt great until I realized the guy she was there with was her husband. LOL. I got nervous, but it turned out they were in an open marriage and had 2 homes, one his and one hers. I ended up spending the weekend with her and having fun. It was definitely a wild experience. I would have felt bad, but all parties involved, including the husband, were fine with it, so I chalk it up to a wild wedding weekend. Funny enough, we've gotten together every time I visit my friends in Florida. Truly a different kind of people there. Story 7. The actual love of my life cheated on me with some guy she didn't even care about just to piss me off. Life is messy when you're young and dumb. If I had my time back, I would have done anything to keep her and be a better partner. I was absent a lot because of work, and even though we agreed it would be okay so we could save extra money for a while, I know she wasn't actually okay with it. She never said it outright, but I could see it in her actions. Man, I miss her. Later on, she got cancer. Life can be really messed up. Literally anything can happen. Hold on to the people who love you as hard as you can. Story 8. I was the other man once. It was a friend's wife. It wasn't right, but he really did treat her like crap. If anything, my presence helped him because it kept her in the marriage longer. Plus, I went over and did the housework he wouldn't do. So, he got free labor. She got emotional support and some good time. For a while it worked, but the guilt eventually got to her. She cut off the Babut still wanted the emotional support and my help around the house. I don't think he cared as long as he had pot and Ritalin. I tried to make it work, but I wasn't happy with the new arrangement. She kept waiting for him to treat her right. He kept smoking pot and taking Ritalin. Eventually, she and I got into an argument, and it was over. We did it one more time after that. He ended up divorcing her about a year later. There's more to the story, but that's the important part. The moral of the story is don't get involved with people who are in relationships. It won't end well for anyone. Story 9. As a stupid teenager in college, I was the other woman. My friend and I met this guy at a gas station. He was hot, so my friend hit on him, and we ended up hanging out. We went back to his place, and his super hot roommate was there. We did it a couple of times. I knew he had a girlfriend, but I didn't know her, and it didn't matter to me. Back then, I didn't regret it or feel bad about it. I hate to admit it, but I kind of liked the situation. Stupid teenagers. Now I look back and realize how messed up it was. Damn, I was ruthless. To his girlfriend, my 40-year-old self apologizes for being an a-hole 20-ish years ago. Story 10. I'm a little baffled by the vehement, mostly one-sided responses toward people who have been the other person. Comments like, crappy people don't do that, or you deserved it, especially when those people later suffer because of a bad relationship themselves, are incredibly short-sighted. Get off your high horses. Human relationships are vastly complex, and there are countless factors that can lead someone in a relationship to engage in situations like this. While being mindful of your role and aware of the problems in someone else's relationship is admirable, it is ultimately the responsibility of the people in that relationship to maintain a healthy, stable bond, one that doesn't lead to situations that hurt others. That responsibility does not rest with the third party. Story 11. Initially, I had no regrets, but after some time, that changed. When we started dating, she was engaged but told me she was planning on leaving him and just couldn't because of her financial situation. It didn't hurt that the guy was a prick. After a while, I realized she wasn't actually looking to leave him and just wanted something different for a bit. Because of that, I somewhat regret the relationship. Not because of her significant other, though. The guy is still a prick. Story 12. I did this in college. She had a boyfriend, and I knew it. I felt bad for him, but in the same way I feel bad for anyone being cheated on. I didn't feel personally responsible for it. I'm nothing special. It's not like she had been faithful until she met me, and I was just so irresistible. I also didn't seduce her against her will. She didn't want to be with him, but she was afraid to be alone. So she was basically double dipping, living the single life while having a boyfriend. She was going to sleep with someone anyway, so there was no sense in me missing out. I also wasn't the only guy she was seeing behind his back. I didn't know him personally. He wasn't a friend. I didn't know much about him, but I also didn't try to. I could have probably gotten in touch with him to tell him, but I didn't. I know from Facebook that she eventually married another guy and later divorced him. Story 13. 2 times and I didn't know. I had just met them, we hooked up, and it turned out her boyfriend was chilling with us the whole night, just sitting in the living room and saying nothing. The other time, this girl was a cashier at a grocery store, and her boyfriend was the bagger. I came through with a bottle of rum, and she said I must be having a good time. On the spot, I invited her to hang out the next weekend. I had no idea her boyfriend was the bagger. The next weekend came, and the next, and the next. We fooled around for 3 weeks. Then the boyfriend saw me at a bar and tried to start something. I straight up told him I had no idea and that she never mentioned him. His reaction was, oh, then I really got to talk with her. Yeah, dude, I apologized, he apologized, and I thought we were cool. Later, when he was selling some things online, my buddy and I tried to purchase from him. He told my buddy, oh, yeah, screw him. He can pay like 50% more. So I just had another buddy get what I needed through him. Little jerk. Another girl tried to cheat with me after drinking, so I just had her sleep on my couch. I was almost in another situation where I knew the girl had a boyfriend, so I simply rejected her at the door of my hotel room. I said, no, just go home. Story 14. I've been the other person. Slept with someone knowing they were engaged. Worse, I actually knew her fiancé. He was a good guy. We were drunk in university and stupid. I felt really terrible afterward. Things got a lot worse when she accused me of manipulating her consent while she was drunk. supposedly to save her relationship, a blatant lie since she approached me. She later admitted to making up the story after her fiancé noticed something was off in her behavior. I had to prove myself innocent in a student union trial, which I eventually did because I had screenshots of WhatsApp chats with her the next morning. She said she regretted nothing and that it had been enjoyable. This was 20 hours later, so obviously she wasn't still drunk. I made my point and was relieved. It was a nightmare. It wasn't worth it in any way. I've also been cheated on while in a relationship. That's a truly wrecking experience, a lot worse. I guess I deserved it, karma, as they say. I've never cheated on someone while in a relationship, so I have no idea what that feels like, and I'm not even a bit willing to find out. Story 15. I did this once a long time ago. At the time, I didn't feel I did anything wrong. She was unhappy and thought I could give her what she felt she was missing. I didn't do anything she didn't ask for, and I don't see how I had any obligation to her boyfriend. Bro code? I didn't even know the guy. I do regret doing, hey, hit, not for his sake, but for mine. It taught me that when it comes to people, what you see is what you get. At the time, I didn't think I deserved any better. Now I know that I do. Story 16. I felt great about it, and I still do. Back in undergrad, she came from a hardcore Christian family. She had a boyfriend back home who was vetted by her parents and that she was expected to marry, but her only interactions with him were in group settings or chaperoned courtship dates. We became friends, and it became clear she wanted to rebel from that world, but wasn't ready to have that conversation with her parents. We were mostly just friends, but we hooked up a couple of times. She is now an out lesbian, I'm a guy, and obviously did not marry that guy or stay in her parents' cult. We are still friends. She's friends with my wife too, who knows all of this. I have zero regrets. Story 17. I felt guilty about it, but I also constructed an elaborate rationalization for myself, something like, they're going to break up anyway, and this is my only chance before she moves to another country. He was a very nice guy, and I knew it was wrong, but my self-esteem was at one of its lowest points, and I didn't have the strength of character to do the right thing. That experience gave me a lot of important perspective on people who cheat, lie, or do immoral things. I consider myself a very moral person, but now I understand that knowing what's right and having the personal wherewithal to do it are two different things. As soon as my self-esteem recovered, I broke it off. I used to think in terms of good, moral people and crappy, unscrupulous people. Now, whenever someone acts poorly, I generally assume it's because they lack the internal support to be better or kinder. It's really helped me expand my compassion for others. Story 18. I'm trans and always felt like I'd be unable to have a normative relationship with anyone. My first encounters were always in the dark with married men or men with girlfriends. I even lost my virginity to a friend's boyfriend, usually in cars or similar situations. It always felt horrible, but it was the only affection I felt I could get. As I transitioned and became prettier, that mindset stuck with me, and I became distrustful of men because of my early experiences. I never pursued relationships, even as men's behavior toward me changed. I'm too afraid of karma and of what men do. I have a boyfriend now who lives with me, and I'm paranoid and fearful of everything, especially since he has spent some time talking to other women online. I don't really see the point in staying with me because of my character flaws and how abnormal I feel. It seems likely that he will eventually leave me for a normal person without all the baggage, which in turn would have him back with me, like the others who cheated. It doesn't feel good to think or feel this way. I feel guilty and bad about the attention I received and what I did to feel affection, or less lonely, and about the people I hurt. At the time, I was so angry about what they got to have, and I didn't care and just wanted to feel better. In the end, I never felt better, and now I'm angry before I even have anything to be angry about. Story 19. 25 years ago, there was this girl in my neighborhood in high school. We were the same grade and age. We knew each other, but never really hung out much. We both went away to different colleges. She started seeing a friend of mine in college, and they had a child together. Over the next few years, as I saw my friend, she was obviously there too. My friend's relationship was not a good one. He was really toxic and a narcissist. She was wicked smart, but insecure. I didn't realize it at the time, but he was very mentally abusive to her. Around the age of 22, both she and I had what you might call glow-ups. She became incredibly attractive and regained her confidence, while my own hormones kicked in. I got chiseled, and I noticed that girls found me attractive. The three of us, me, my buddy, and her, would go out every Friday night once we turned 21. As their relationship worsened, he would stop going out with us. I would show up at their place, fully expecting both of them to go, but he would always find some excuse to stay in. He encouraged us to go out anyway. We usually met up with other friends, so nothing ever seemed inappropriate. Then, one night, it just kind of happened. She had driven to my place to go out, and I drove. We had fun with friends and drove back to my place at night so she could get her car. We pulled up in front of my place and I parked. As I leaned forward to take the keys out of the ignition, I noticed she was staring at me intensely. An instant later, we were caught up in the moment in the front seat. There hadn't even been a thought or intention of this before, but in a split second, it happened. Afterwards, it was nothing but confusion. We both enjoyed it and knew it was wrong. A couple of days later, she called and said we needed to talk. At this point, I was ready to face the consequences of our actions. I went to her place and my friend was not there, just her. I was hesitant at first, but we needed to talk. When I walked in, she was standing in the living room and simply said, "Hi." What happened next continued for several months. Now, I had some fleeting relationships before this, and a mix of fleeting and genuinely caring relationships since. Until her, and never since, have I experienced the level of perfect and instant intimate connection. She instinctively knew every place to touch, everything to say, and every expression of desire I needed, as if she were reading my mind. She said the same of me. We knew what we were doing was wrong, and for lack of a better description, we were addicted to each other. I've never physically connected with anyone like her. I knew it was wrong, and I knew the longer it went on, the bigger the fallout would be. So I decided to move away for grad school, and we agreed to end it. I needed to move past it, and she needed to resolve her marriage. On 2 occasions, she drove 3 hours one way to visit me unannounced for quick flings. Those visits taught us both 2 things. One, the basis of our relationship, while absolutely magical intimately, was not a solid foundation for a future together. 2, she was getting the mental help she needed and told me that in order to move past her toxic marriage, she had to move past me too. While we knew it needed to end, it still really hurt to hear. She soon filed for divorce and did the proverbial worked as an exotic dancer to put herself through med school. I took the lessons from this experience into all future relationships. I have never gone out even for lunch alone with a married or otherwise involved woman, including business meals. I understand that while there was no immediate consequence for me and the relationship she was in was toxic, my involvement with her was wrong and negatively impacted other people. Story 20. No regrets at all. She had a boyfriend, but it was more of a formality. They never really saw each other outside of the church's youth group they both attended. It was the kind of nonsense you do when you're young, just so you can say, "I have a boyfriend in a different school." Anyway, a friend told me about the boyfriend after I'd already asked her out, right before our first date. It rattled me a bit, so I didn't make a move that night. "I made my move on our second date," she responded, and we continued to date. Honestly, I don't think she ever officially broke up with the guy. She just stopped going to the youth group, so she never saw him again. Technically, I guess they'd still be considered dating since they never formally broke up. I don't know. Either way, we've been married for more than a decade, so I guess I ended up dating that guy's girlfriend, but I'm pretty sure she hasn't heard from him since we started dating. I hadn't thought about him in over 15 years, so I don't think I can say I feel guilty about it. Story 21. We didn't sleep together as in banging, but we did literally sleep together a couple of times. That said, on one occasion after we woke up and were still cuddling, a playful bite turned into something more intimate, and before we knew it, I was on top of her, unsure whether to take the next step. I did, doing something that wasn't exactly a kiss on the lips, but wasn't exactly nodded either. Right after that, she sat up, and so did I. We apologized, and they did as well. We had both come to our senses and instantly felt guilty. We both blamed ourselves, and I spent a few days being distant and feeling awful. However, we reconciled a couple of days later, since we were still really close friends despite what had happened, and we moved past it. She eventually broke up with her boyfriend within a month, but I never asked why or how that came about. Nowadays, we're no longer friends, for entirely different and more complicated reasons, but that was the only time I've ever been in a situation like that. I don't entirely regret it for personal, somewhat selfish reasons, but I did feel terrible at the time. Story 22. I had something like a relationship with a married woman for 3 months. I met her at her company party, where I was shooting photos. We hit it off and hooked up in a car before leaving the party. Later, we went back to her hotel room and did it some more. At one point that night, a group of her coworkers came to the room to check on her. One said, "That doesn't look like your husband." The door closed and we went back to hooking up. I stopped her and asked what they meant. She explained that she was married, but she and her husband were not intimate and hadn't been for 4 years. We agreed to see each other again. Each time, we spent the entire night banging. This continued for 3 months. It eventually ended when I told her I couldn't spend time with her because I was sick with the flu. I never heard from her again. There were moments in bed when I imagined her husband catching us mid-session and blasting us both with a shotgun. That was the only time I felt guilty. In the end, we gave each other what we needed and nothing more. I needed intimacy without attachment. She needed physical connection and to feel desired. Sometimes I miss her. Story 23. I met a woman while walking back from a friend's wedding after she dropped her bag and everything spilled everywhere. I helped her pick it up, and the flirting started. Eventually, as we after-partied and kept talking, it came up that she had a child and was still married to the child's father. That initially dulled my desire to sleep with her. Then she dropped the bomb that she was already having an affair with her married boss, who was supposedly going to leave his wife because they were truly in love. I didn't want to be the one ruining a marriage, but the situation was such a mess before I even met her that I didn't care anymore. The only reason I regret it is because the doing it with her was risky, and she kept asking it. I have never been so attentive to where a used rubber has been in my life. Story 24. I went as long as I could without mentioning that I knew she had a boyfriend. It wasn't until after the third hookup that I said, "So, how's your man? Seems like he's cool with this." Her face dropped, and she said, "I didn't think you knew. I feel so dumb." Well, duh. Fast forward a few months, we kept hooking up, and then I put my clown makeup on and thought I was in love with her. Now she's a mother and with a totally different guy who I slightly feel bad for. I'd feel even worse for myself if that guy ended up being me because I knew firsthand that she was a cheater. Anyway, that was a mess, lol. Story 25. I slept with a man who I knew was married. I gave him multiple outs before it happened to make sure it was what he wanted because I didn't care either way about his wife at the time. I had no regrets. Fast forward 9 months later, they split up because I wasn't the only one he had cheated on her with. Plus, he had treated her terribly emotionally. The wife and I started talking and she wanted to become friends. I couldn't do that without telling her what I had done. So I told her. She laughed at first, but the next day said she couldn't be friends with me. I said I understood. Still, no regret on my end. Story 26. I had it both ways with my ex. She cheated on me in a terrible way. I tried to make it work, but we eventually broke up. 2 years later, she was married, and we started talking again. I could see a pattern, but I was still into her and feeling lonely. I flew to another country to bang with her. It was amazing. Some of the most intense one I've ever had. The regret afterward, though, was devastating, and her begging me to get back together was heartbreaking. Definitely do not recommend that part. Story 27. The way I look at it is this. My engagement with whoever is just that. If they want to step out of their relationship and hook up with me, that's fine. I'm not going to ask about their marriage. All I ask is to keep it between me and them, and no one else. You don't know how relationships and marriages are literally the same thing every day, a routine of habit. If someone is playing out a fantasy they have, learning a new liking, or doing a thing they already enjoy but feel their partner will judge them, why not explore it? Why should I feel bad for someone trusting me to help them discover themselves? Hell, it could even save their marriage or relationship in the long run. No. Regret or guilt toward the other person. I don't know them, and I don't plan to. I'm not friends with them, and maybe it'll teach him to stay on top of his girl and not be a mediocre, subpar significant other. Maybe he'll actually put time in to learn his partner instead of playing COD for 7 hours. Story 28. I read almost all the regret stories, but I had an entirely different experience. I met a woman at work a couple of years ago who was married with 2 kids. After a while, we hit it off, and I ended up at her place. Her husband used to be away on business quite often. At one point, things went all the way after I made the first and final move. I'm pretty sure nothing would have happened if I hadn't, even though there was no hesitation on her part. We ended up seeing each other quite regularly for about 2 years, and it was great. At the end, her husband switched jobs, and I got into a relationship, so naturally it died down. We still regularly see each other and think back fondly, but the banging part is no longer there. She even thanked me a couple of times, saying that I helped her get through her marriage by reinvigorating her. Now, after a few years, their relationship is back in a slump, so who knows? I should also mention that since I got into a relationship, we had 2 or 3 occasions where things heated up and went further than they should have. But for both of us, it just felt different. All in all, I'm very glad it happened. And she's a friend for life. Story 29. My now girlfriend and I were 21 and 22 at the time. I was out of the closet but had never really dated. She knew she was a lesbian but was still living for her parents' approval and was dating a guy at the time. She told me she was very unhappy, and I could see it in her face that she was miserable. We became good friends, and that led to more. I told her very shortly afterward that I would not continue if she was still in a relationship, so she made the decision to leave him and come out of the closet. We're still together almost 7 years later. I didn't really feel bad because I could tell the relationship she had been in was phony in every aspect. Would I do it again now? No, I'd wait for them to break up and handle it properly, but she was my first everything, I was just so young and inexperienced that I jumped at the opportunity. Story 30. I did it with my friend's mom one time. It was a one-time mistake that I would not make again, but it happened. We actually both had a great time, but she's still married. She was upset with her husband because he had to travel for work. He's a professional bass player and instructor, and had to travel from their home to a nearby town for a couple of days every other week. I have always been close to my friend, especially his mom, and I felt horrible afterward. I know I cannot bring this up with my friend, but sometimes I feel awkward going over to his house. She's really friendly when I visit, but somehow that makes me feel worse. I definitely feel a lot of regret, but it was a very sweet moment. Story 31. I rationalized it with self-deprecation, so I didn't feel bad, but I could have been full of crap. Basically, my thinking was, I'm not some irresistible piece of A, and I didn't push it until it was clear they wanted to do it. If they were going to cheat on their significant other anyway, I might as well have some fun. That was my rationale. I don't feel great typing that out. It was my sloppy steak era. Story 32, I was in a group of hard partiers. We were all probably alcoholics and borderline addicts. We were friends, but no one really cared about each other. One guy's girlfriend brought another woman to a place where I was playing cards and asked me to come with them. It was fun. That same guy had robbed another person, which had cost me a little money to fix. So the situation actually felt kind of satisfying. So I wouldn't say I feel bad, other than in the context of just being a crappy person in general. I had done way worse things before I sobered up. I don't wish any harm on anyone. I just hope he got his crap straight. Story 33. Only once when I was 18. I was friends with another boy my age who I knew had a girlfriend, but I didn't pursue him. I had no idea he was attracted to me. I invited him to a group friend's sleepover for my birthday, and everything was normal and platonic until everybody else had fallen asleep. It's not something I'm proud of, but I was a petty teenager, and this girl had been kind of rude to me, so at the time I didn't feel remorseful. It's not something I would ever do again. At 25, I'm of the opinion that participating in a secret affair is conceptually an affront to the idea of true love, and you take psychic damage when you do it. Plus, Americans have guns, and that's a great way to get shot. Story 34. It felt fantastic. She was so enthusiastic, so eager. I was taking something that wasn't mine, and she was choosing me over who she was supposed to choose. I didn't feel regret or sympathy. She made her choice. She chose me because he had dropped the ball because he wasn't enough for her. It was competition, and I won. Fair and square. Maybe if he had been better to her, maybe if he had been as charming, handsome, or kind, maybe if he had lit up certain parts of her brain, she would have stayed true. But all I did was be what she wanted, give her the choice, and become the consequence of their choices. It was such a powerful combination. Power, ego, lust, the forbidden, the victory, love, chemistry. She was probably my first or second best lover. Maybe it was wrong, but that was the point. I feel nothing but nostalgia. I'll always cherish what we shared and mourn what could have been, despite knowing we only worked in a specific context, at a specific time. She makes me long for parallel universes. Story 35. I was the other guy a couple of times. Once in high school, we were both in relationships and hooked up. We both broke it off with the others. Once in college, I got involved with a girl. We flirted a lot, and I later found out she was engaged. She split with her fiancé, but later got mad when he slept with her friend, who also had a boyfriend. She was upset with me when I pointed out the hypocrisy. The final time, I slept with a really cute girl who told me afterward that she was married. They were in a long-distance relationship. We continued the affair for a few months until she moved out of town. I don't know if he ever found out, but I think she told him. I feel bad for some of the guys because it has happened to me too. I know how they feel. Some of those relationships were doomed anyway. I was the excuse, not the cause. Story 36. I am gay, 33, and met a 46-year-old farmer on one of the hookup sites. I saw him intimately for almost a year. It was long distance, but I would drive a couple of hours out to see him a few times a month. We texted a lot and had a really strong, special bond. I fell in love with him deeply, but I worked with him on his terms because he was deeply closeted in a conservative town and industry. But the heart wants what it wants. In October, it abruptly ended without a word. I later found out he was married to a woman the whole time. There were some flags I overlooked, but I always justified them as him being in the closet. It's now January, and I'm still deeply hurt and in heartache, working on moving on. I haven't spoken to him since a semi-intense conversation in October, where I was honest about how I felt. I really hope time helps heal this so I can move on. I just feel embarrassed. Had I known he was married, I wouldn't have gotten involved at all. There are many married to women, men on hookup sites for gay men, and it sucks having to sift through all that. If you choose the wife and kids route, you are closing the door on men, or anyone else, really. You cannot have your cake and eat it too. I hope he has felt guilt about this, about me, and that something stirs in his heart because what he did to me and to his wife was not right. Story 37. I dated a girl for 2.5 years. She told me she loved me just 2 days after we met. We did long distance for 9 months, and then I moved 6 hours away to be with her. During that entire time, she was sleeping with my best friend. The only way I found out was when he texted his ex-girlfriend bragging about it, and she sent me the screenshot. That experience has messed me up forever. Story 38. It happened to me. I restarted talking with a female friend from 10 years ago. She was 24 or 25 at the time, and I was 18. When we started talking again, I admitted to her that as a teenager, I had wanted to sleep with her, but I was shy and never said anything. She admitted the same. She had wanted to sleep with me too, but was too shy to tell me. She then asked if she could come to my place. She actually had a boyfriend, but she said he didn't make her happy anymore. Early in their relationship, they were intimate frequently, but at this point, they were only intimate about once a month. What we shared was actually the best times of my life. We saw each other twice. She asked if we should do it again, but I said we should stop, because if we saw each other too frequently, I would end up jealous that she had a boyfriend, and I didn't want to be the third wheel. By the way, her boyfriend had agreed in a way. She told me he was okay if she slept with someone else, as long as he didn't have to know or hear about it. Their relationship didn't break. They've been together for 5 years since then, and even moved to another country together. I don't regret it at all. I realized one of my childhood fantasies, and everyone ended up happy. Their relationship didn't break, and I had an unforgettable experience. Story 39. Back in college, I had a couple of encounters where I didn't know the girl's relationship status up front. One girl had a new boyfriend every few weeks, so I figured that was her usual pattern. But I decided I wouldn't be the next guy. Another time, I hung out with a really cool girl in her dorm room and noticed a photo of a guy on the wall in a couple-like pose. I asked who he was, and she said he was kinda her ex. Nothing happened that night. The next day, I ran into a roommate who explained that they were sort of broken up because long distance wasn't working and he had been a jerk. They didn't even talk anymore. We ended up dating for a short while, and she was great. I like to think she was honest with me, but looking back, I wish I had known for certain before going further. Story 40. I was the other man in a coworker's relationship for about a year. At first, I really believed her when she said she no longer loved her partner and was planning to leave him. She even told him the same. I had just been dumped and was crushing on her, so I thought, why not? We cheated together for a year, ultimately breaking all three of our hearts. Over time, I could see she wasn't going to leave him, but I was already in love. I thought that if I showed her I was a better partner, she'd leave him. Nope. After months of turmoil, we both realized she still loved him. It was part of their messy, toxic relationship. To complicate matters, we were coworkers, and I eventually left my job over the situation. Looking back, I'm glad that chapter is over. I know now I deserve someone truly dedicated, and she wasn't a good partner to either of us. Her partner wasn't blameless either. Hopefully he learned something too. Story 41. I got caught in an emotional affair with my ex while he had started a long-distance relationship with a girl he had cheated on me. 4. She was moving overseas for him. We did drugs, and he physically cheated on his girlfriend with me. The physical part lasted a month, the emotional affair 2 months. It was completely against my values and represented my absolute low point. My messed up brain wanted to prove how bad he was and see how far he would go after flirting with me on Instagram DMs. It ended badly, and I didn't feel better or less stupid. Selfishly, it was a wake-up call. I confronted him and threatened to expose everything if he contacted me again, which he hasn't. I also haven't touched drugs since. While I feel like jerk on a fundamental level, I don't feel bad for her. She knew he was seeing me when they first hooked up, and I don't think she has any idea what went down. Story 42. I was 18 at the time, going through the kinds of things 18-year-olds go through. A girl I really liked started to notice me, and we were flirting all the time. It was my first experience with someone who seemed to genuinely reciprocate my interest. Things went sideways very quickly, and I was left deeply hurt. Around that time, I had recently become friends with another girl. I didn't realize it then, but apparently she had feelings for me. Nothing ever materialized between me and the first girl, and the second girl was there to catch me and make me feel better. She also had a boyfriend, who was a friend of mine. I knew this when she wanted to sleep with me. I did it anyway because I was a depressed, hormone-addled teenager who just wanted to feel something other than existential anguish. This happened at a party, and someone there told her boyfriend. A couple of months later, at a mutual friend's party, he confronted me. He was furious. I had done something I knew was wrong, and this was the consequence of my actions. I was also in one of the worst depressive episodes I've ever been in at the time. I remember him confronting me by a car, and I put my head between the car door and the pillar and told him he could off me if he wanted to. I felt like a total piece of crap. It wasn't even about the girl. It was about myself. Part of me thinks I would have felt relief if he had hurt me. I don't remember exactly what he said, but his attitude was essentially, I'm really mad, but I'm not going to do that. I was pathetic. He was a decent guy. I sincerely apologized. I know that mental illness, like depression, is not an excuse for bad behavior. All I've been able to do since that moment is try to do better. Story 43. The knowing part came after the deed. But here's the history. I'd been texting a girl for more than a year. She told me she had dumped her boyfriend and started sending me explicit pictures. We met and had a lot of amazing time, which she enjoyed a lot too. After a week of this unconditional banging, she decided that we weren't meant to be. Understandably, I was a little sad. Then comes the second part. My best friend is friends with her best friend and eventually found out that not only had she never broken up with her boyfriend, he had driven her to me many times. The best part? She reported everything that happened to her best friend. Later, I even saw the text about how I have a huge dong. It was my first time, but she said I did it like I had at least 10 years of experience. She also said her boyfriend would never be like that, but she couldn't break up with him. It broke me a little. The lengths some people go to jump on another person are unbelievable. I had been baited into sleeping with a girl who was in a relationship. Story 44, I hooked up with a close friend who was engaged at the time, while I also had a girlfriend. We were close, I knew her family, and her parents liked me. The day after, we talked, and she gave me a letter saying she had been in love with me for some time. I was dumbfounded. Operative word, dumb, and speechless. I had hidden feelings for her as well, so decided it wasn't going to work between us and asked me to burn the letter that very day. I told my girlfriend a few days later, and she forgave me. We went to the friend's wedding a few months after that. My girlfriend cheated on me and left me the following year. The friend got divorced and remarried a few years later, but has stayed in touch with me all these years. Do I regret it? The short answer is yes, but not in the way you might think. Story 45. So I got about as close as you can without going through with it. I left a party in a taxi and offered to drop a nice woman off on the way, since she was leaving at the same time. We clearly had chemistry and were very intoxicated, so it wasn't innocent by any means, but I didn't think much of it. At her place, she asked me to help her to her apartment, which I agreed to because I was stupid. I told the driver to wait outside. He said I needed to pay first. I did, and he immediately drove off. I went up to her apartment, ostensibly to get a glass of water and a new taxi. Obviously, she didn't ask me there for water, or think I actually came for it. In what felt like 2.5 seconds, I had a very attractive young woman sitting close with me telling me, "It's up to you what we do." Fast forward a few of the most terrifying and internally challenging minutes of my life, and a phone call saved me by the bell. I had ordered 8 taxis to my location through an app, and they called me to stop or they would block my account. I got up immediately, thanked her, apologized for leading her on, though I had made clear all night that I was married, told her she was extremely attractive, and said I would probably be seeing a mental image of her in my head for the next 50 years. Then I got out of there as fast as I could. There was zero chance I would have gotten caught, but somehow, even that drunk, something inside me told me that living with the consequences of going through with it would have been too difficult, so I had to get out. I still regret it and feel enormous guilt many years later. On the other hand, I feel relieved knowing that in the toughest moment, I was able to muster enough strength to stop my train of shameful actions and prevent myself from hurting others and myself deeply. At the end of the day, you can tell everyone else whatever you want, but the mirror will show you only what you really are. Story 46. I fooled around with one of my professor's wives in college. I knew it was wrong, but I justified it with, well, I'm not doing anything wrong. We're adults. She's the married one. She's the one who has to live with it. I feel bad for the guy, but she had also cheated on him about 7 years earlier. You know what they say, once a cheater, always a cheater. It's not a time I look back on fondly, but it was fun in the moment. Story 47. When I met her, she had a boyfriend who lived on the other side of the country. We started getting to know each other, and pretty soon, it turned out that we were in love. She told me she wanted to end her relationship properly first and that it could take a long time. I said, okay. During that time, we regularly met and had wonderful times together without doing anything physical. After 1.5 years, I said that I needed a break because I dreaded waiting for her and told her to contact me once she had broken up with him. 3 to 4 months later, she was waiting for me at the train station I used every day. That was 5 years ago, and we have been together ever since. She is my wife now. Story 48. I had a friend with benefits for more than 6 months. One night, I went over to her place, and she told me that she was now in a relationship with another guy because I didn't want anything exclusive with her. She said tonight would be our last hookup. Basically, the day after she agreed to be exclusive with someone else, she cheated on him with me. I didn't feel much about it. She seemed like the type to do that anyway, so I wasn't surprised. Story 49. Kind of. I was in a friends with benefits situation in college with a girl who had a boyfriend back home. We ended our involvement when college ended, returned to our hometowns, and she eventually married him. As far as I know, they're still together. I felt a little bad for the guy, but it was her who was cheating, not me. I tried not to think about it. I certainly wouldn't do something like that now. Note that I wasn't the only guy she fooled around with during her time there. Story 50. In my early 20s, I did this. The regret I've carried over the years for my behavior still follows me well into my 30s. I've been cheated on before and after that, and it's a very painful experience that I wouldn't wish on anyone. But the pain of consciously making that choice, of cheating, stings far worse than having been cheated on. When you've been cheated on, you can choose to let it consume you or learn to move forward, realizing that their choice is something they have to live with. When you've committed the act of cheating or been the other person involved, and you truly regret it, that guilt and shame can follow you for the rest of your life. Moral of the story, don't be a cheating a-hole. And if you get cheated on, it will get better with time. Story 51. Even though I slept with a guy who was in an open relationship, I still felt weird when his husband came out and we were just chilling on the couch, cuddled up. It felt awkward for me, but they both seemed very chill about it. When he had to leave for work, I almost said, "Thank you." Like, "Thank you for letting me sleep with your husband." But I caught myself. They're still together now, I believe, but I often wonder how stable the relationship is. Story 52. Years ago, my ex begged me to come over to sleep with her on her new best friend's bed. No regrets. It was still one of the best, most passionate experiences I've ever had. It was amazing, and my confidence got a real boost because she could have called anyone, but she called me. Call me a douche, an a-hole, or whatever. I probably am. I usually don't do it with someone who's with someone else, but I broke my rule that one time and have no regrets. I never did it again, and it won't be happening again, but I regret nothing from that one experience. Story 53. I used to do this a lot when I was young. Please don't come at me in the comments. I came from an extremely broken home, ironically ruined by infidelity. Honestly, the thing I felt most when I was doing this was envy for the significant other. I would see pictures of them in the house or look them up on social media. They were the girls these men actually loved. I was the girl they banged with. Because of the envy, it was hard for me to feel bad for them. They got to meet the family. They got the best versions of the guys. They were adored and cherished. It's all pretty messed up. I haven't really trusted a guy since. So, no, I didn't feel bad for them. I envied them. They weren't the girl getting drunk and doing it in the backseat of someone's car. They were multitudes better than I was. And in my mind at the time, that meant they didn't deserve my compassion. They'd already won. Story 54. I had an affair with a married man. I knew it was wrong, the banging was great, and I didn't really like the wife, so at the time I didn't care. However, as I've aged and matured, I realize it was a stupid thing to do. I don't fully regret it. It's part of my history, my story, and I use it as a lesson. Character development. Story 55, I didn't give a crap. They were high school sweethearts, but now in a long-distance relationship. She was kind of ready to check out when we started hooking up. He had cheated on her many times before. In the end, it turned out that while he was living in another city for work, he had a whole separate secret girlfriend he was living with, while the high school girlfriend had waited for him for years, thinking she was engaged to him. Story 56. I was something of a serial cheater, but I never cheated on a girlfriend. I would break up with them if I wanted to be with someone else, and I might have kissed someone once while in a committed relationship. I used to actively seek out women in relationships who might cheat with me. I could almost instantly tell if a woman was willing. I justified it with a few points. 1. I wasn't the one cheating, they were. 2. If their partner treated them right, they wouldn't be looking elsewhere. 3. They were going to cheat anyway, so it might as well be me. I enjoyed it. It was the best parts of a relationship without the negatives. Later, I started seeing married women sometimes, even with kids, but I made rules. No kids, no engaged women. In my 30s, I met a woman I didn't expect to cheat, and over a year we fell in love and eventually went all the way. It was different from the games before. Story 57. I used to be something of a serial cheater, I guess. I have literally never cheated on a girlfriend. I've broken up with them because I wanted to be with someone else, but I've never done more than kiss someone once while in a committed relationship. However, I used to be very much into getting women in relationships to cheat on their significant others with me. It got to be like a sixth sense. I could tell within minutes of talking to a woman if she was willing to cheat. It started in high school and continued through my 20s without bothering me in the slightest. I justified it with several points. 1. I'm not the one cheating. I'm not in a relationship. They are, so that's on them. 2. If their significant other was treating them right, they wouldn't be looking for someone else. 3. They're going to cheat whether it's with me or someone else, so it might as well be me. I also enjoyed it because it was really like having the best parts of a relationship without any of the negatives. When they were with me, it was all about romance and intimacy. Then they could go back to complaining about life and worrying about finances with their boyfriends. In my 20s, especially the late 20s, it started getting more serious. Now, it wasn't just girls with boyfriends, it was married women, sometimes with kids. I made a rule never to mess with women who had kids. I wasn't about to break up families even if the women were miserable. I also learned fairly early on not to mess with women who were engaged but not yet married. For one thing, they usually weren't interested unless the engagement had been going on for years and still no date was set. For another, if they were willing to cheat just a few months into an engagement or a few months before their wedding, it was usually because they were either unstable or they were having second thoughts and needed someone to talk them down and help them realize they should stick it out. It wasn't until my 30s, though, that I ran into a situation where a woman I didn't think would cheat ended up completely changing my life. Over the course of a year, I fell completely in love with her, and I think she loved me back. Over several encounters, we progressively went further until we finally went all the way. After that, she felt so guilty she immediately told her husband, who, of course, made her cut off all contact with me. It was like she had died, although I would still run into her occasionally, because we worked in close proximity and still went to school together, even though she had quit her job. It shattered me. My dad died during that time, and I seriously mourned the death of that relationship more than I did the death of my own father. Granted, my father was an alcoholic and smoked 2 packs a day for 40 years, so it wasn't a surprise. When he got lung cancer and died 6 months after being diagnosed, I was prepared for it. The relationship, on the other hand, had been the happiest I'd ever been one day, and the next, one of the most miserable. The worst part was that her husband was a great guy. There was no reason for her to cheat. Her biggest complaint was that he was too competent and made her feel like she wasn't needed. Like if she disappeared from his life, he would just continue on like nothing happened. Not sure what that said about me. I had met him and thought he was a really great guy. I purposefully avoided hanging out with him because I felt we could be friends. And I had a rule that I never messed with a friend's love interests. I still don't understand to this day why she would cheat, and I actually suspect it was just to make him jealous and show him that he really needed her or something. After that, I swore I would never be someone's other man ever again. I had a fling with a woman who told me she had separated from her baby's father, whom she had been with for 8 years. But then I found out they were still living in the same house, and he didn't actually know they were separated, just that they were sleeping in different rooms and not really talking. I was pretty pissed about that one and broke it off when I found out. I had another opportunity with a woman who was newly married and in an open, don't ask, don't tell relationship, but I turned her down and told her to break it off before I would do anything. She didn't, though she did get divorced about a year later. No one saw that one coming. Then I reconnected with an old friend. We had a little fling shortly after she and her husband had split, but before the divorce was finalized, and then got in an argument and didn't talk for 2 years. We've now been together for over 10 years, living together for 8 of those, and are quite happy. We plan to spend the rest of our lives together, as far as I know anyway. We have our rocky times, but we work them out. The thing is, I realized that in my need to get with these women in relationships, I was really just looking for someone who would choose me over someone else. My mother had left me with my father to move away with her new boyfriend after they split, even though I begged her to stay. When that was obviously not going to happen, I begged her to take me with her. Then later, she chose the bottle over me, time and time again. Then in high school, I had a summer girlfriend for 3 years that I'd see whenever I visited my mom. I was going to ask her to marry me when I got back there after graduating my senior year, but when I arrived, she told me she had met someone and was engaged, getting married in a month. She really dodged a bullet with that one. I would have been a terrible husband back then. Last I checked, she was still happily married with a dozen or so kids. Mormons. Anyway, I still wouldn't feel bad about having a woman cheat on her significant other with me if I were single again. Most of the time, the guys who were getting cheated on deserved it. They were pieces of crap who treated their women horribly. The reason I wouldn't do it now, though, is more for my own sanity and well-being. It's not healthy, and it's ultimately unfulfilling. Physical intimacy is actually the most minor part of a relationship and usually the least fulfilling. The companionship and support you both receive and give are what's really important. Story 58. The reality is, if they're going to cheat with me, they were probably going to cheat eventually anyway. How much that bothers me really depends on how well I know their boyfriend or partner. If it's a friend of mine, I'm likely not to do it. I'll tell my friend instead and let them sort it out. Oh, and I keep the receipts. So if my friend says I'm lying, I can show them I'm not. If it's a stranger, I'll go for it, have my fun, and if they think I'm going to be anything serious with them, I make it clear that I don't date cheaters. If it's someone I hate, I can admit that I'm petty enough to not only do it, but go out of my way to completely break up the relationship. But I have to really hate that person. Story 59. My father was a cheater, and I had been cheated on. I swore I would never engage in any of that. After several bad long-term relationships, I met X. He was amazing. After some time, he admitted to being married, and by then I had caught feelings. It was a low point in my life. I rebelled. I was tired of being the good one and decided I was going to do me. It was a bad choice. I always felt guilty about his wife and awful about myself. It didn't last long after I found out he was married, but I still feel gross and ashamed about it. The regret lives on. Story 60. This happened once with a colleague who was flirting with me. She made me invite her back to my place to lend her some DVDs. While we were in my bed starting to fool around, she informed me that she had a long-distance boyfriend. We still went ahead, and it continued regularly for a while after that. I do not feel bad about it to this day. She eventually left her long-distance boyfriend and is now dating another colleague I knew from that time. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.